I'm Emily Rooney. Welcome to this special edition of Greater Boston. When we were reviewing the big stories of the year, one stood out beyond all others. The bombings of the Boston Marathon defined much of what followed over the rest of the year. For that reason, our Year in Review tonight will focus on that event and its aftermath, including the Boston Red Sox World Series Championship. Going back to that day, though, I can remember thinking it seemed like overkill. Massive amounts of security around the finish line of the 117th running of the Boston Marathon. State and local police, the FBI, even Homeland Security. This year, though, their presence was a blessing. It was around 2:50 in the afternoon on April 15th, Marathon Monday. The elite runners were long gone, and hundreds of qualifiers were pouring over the finish line when the unthinkable happened. Two explosions went off in fairly rapid succession, leaving runners and spectators wondering what was going on.
I got into about 26.1 when I heard a loud explosion, and a second after that, I saw the building blow out. But it didn't register what that was going on.
As I approached the barricade, I came up to a cop, and he told me that there had been bombs that went off at the finish line.
It took police just seconds to realize what had just happened. They witnessed two violent explosions, saw the resulting carnage, and quickly moved to cordon off the area. Then the sad reality. 3 people were dead. 8-year-old Martin Richard, 29-year-old restaurant manager Crystal Campbell, and Boston University graduate student Ling-Si Liu. More than 200 were injured and dozens lost limbs. By nightfall, the crime scene expanded. Businesses were shuttered. Sirens screamed endlessly. Still, no who, no why.
We're recommending to people that they stay home, that if they're in hotels in the area, that they return to their rooms, and that they don't go anyplace and congregate in large crowds.
In the days that followed, the mystery deepened. It was a clear act of terrorism, but no person or group claimed responsibility. Meanwhile, in an outpouring of love and support, Copley Square grew into a massive tribute to those killed and injured.
It just breaks my heart, and I'm sorry for those families. Sorry for those people who didn't get to finish their dream.
It was soon clear that the nation was in mourning, sharing Boston's collective horror. The Holy Cross Cathedral opened its doors to a first-come, first-served interfaith service led by the Reverend Liz Walker. Governor Deval Patrick spoke of his personal anger, but finished with a resolve.
So we will recover and repair. We will grieve our losses and heal. We will rise, and we will endure. I am honored and humbled to welcome our friend, our leader, our Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States.
Every one of us has been touched by this attack on your beloved city. Every one of us stands with you. Our prayers are with the injured. As you begin this long journey of recovery, your city is with you. Your Commonwealth is with you. Your country is with you. We will all be with you as you learn to stand and walk and, yes, run again. Of that, I have no doubt you will run again.
It was the same day of the service, just hours later, that FBI Special Agent in Charge, Rick Delorier, released photographs of the 2 suspects.
We consider them to be armed and extremely dangerous. No one should approach them. No one should attempt to apprehend them except law enforcement.
That began one of the scariest manhunts in Boston's recent history. Once the photographs were released, suspects Tamerlan and Jahar Tsarnaev were on the move. They are alleged to have shot an MIT police officer, then hijacked a car and headed to Watertown. In this piece produced on the 6-month anniversary, WGBH's Philip Martin tells us what happened that night.
The city and law enforcement are on edge. At 10:10, nearly 5 hours after the FBI press conference, a 7-Eleven store in Cambridge is robbed. About 10 minutes after that, Cambridge police respond to reports of shots fired on the MIT campus.
Push that ALS unit, officer down.
At 10:31, MIT officer Sean Collier is fighting for his life. He's been shot multiple times while sitting in his cruiser.
Wherever you shot ALS unit, please.
Initially, police think the 7-Eleven robbery and MIT shooting are related. It turns out they are not. But police wonder, could either crime be connected to the marathon bombing manhunt? At 10:58 p.m., a Mercedes SUV is carjacked in Brighton. The victim, Danny, tells WGBH that after a nearly hour-long trip through several communities, he escaped, then told police the hijackers were the marathon bombers. Police traced the car to Watertown using the vehicle's tracking device and the victim's cell phone. Just past midnight on Friday, Watertown police spot the carjacked Mercedes and a green sedan in the vicinity of Dexter Avenue. They chase both cars while bombs are being tossed at them. By 12:38 a.m., Watertown police are engaged in a furious shootout with the suspects near the intersection of Dexter and Laurel. 8 minutes later, Watertown resident Andrew Kitzenberg is watching the shootout from the third floor of 62 Laurel Street. He documents the firefight with a smartphone camera.
I saw two men taking cover behind a dark SUV, and they were shooting down Laurel Street towards officers. And I also had the vantage point of seeing at the end of the block the officers. And it looked to me like there were about 4 or 5 police vehicles at the end of Laurel Street. It really was a firefight. There was a lot of gunshots going off, but I couldn't really tell who was shooting when.
Kitzenberg says the men also set off explosives.
Yes, there were a few bombs that went off throughout the gunfight, and there were 2 smaller explosions, or I guess 2 explosions and one much larger explosion.
While the timeline lays out the dramatic events, WGBH News has spent months trying to get answers to what happened that night from Cambridge to Watertown. We've talked to police on and off the record, a police trainer, and eyewitnesses. Among the many unanswered questions, why were so many bullets fired? At least a dozen homes were hit that night, including that of Andy Fellner and his wife Michelle Smith, who woke up to the sound of explosions and gunfire.
Something was dropping in the house, and it was a sound that I had never heard before. And then we picked these items up that were flying in our house, and we realized pretty quickly that they were bullets.
Fellner says one bullet came within 12 inches of his toddler son's bed. Most of the bullets that struck homes were fired by police. And while they argue the circumstances necessitated extreme action, Boston police policy, for example, states fire only when reasonably certain that there is no substantial risk to bystanders. Andrew Kitzenberg says his roommate got up from his chair just moments before a bullet came through the wall.
And it had penetrated the wall and the desk chair clean through.
Also that night, MBTA police officer Richard Donahue was shot and severely wounded, leading to another lingering question. Who shot him? While the state has charged Johar Tsarnaev with the murder of police officer Collier and other crimes, no one has been charged with shooting Officer Donahue. But eyewitnesses tell us they saw newly arriving police accidentally shoot Donahue while firing at Johar Tsarnaev in the stolen SUV. And another nagging question. How did Johar Tsarnaev elude police? Several eyewitnesses say Tsarnaev ran over his brother and then rammed the stolen SUV into 2 police cars that were blocking the road. Officers chased him on foot. He then ditched the car and ran off. It would be 16 hours before the youngest Tsarnaev was located hiding in a boat, bringing us to this final question. Why did police say they exchanged gunfire with Johar Tsarnaev when it turned out that he was unarmed?
We set up a perimeter around that boat, and over the course of the next hour or so, we exchanged gunfire with the suspect who was inside the boat, and ultimately the hostage rescue team of the FBI made an entry into the boat and removed the suspect who was still alive in the boat.
But police now say that the Tsarnaevs had only one firearm that night, a Ruger semi-automatic pistol, and it was recovered at the scene of the shootout. Still, Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis told us at his recent retirement press conference that law enforcement could not have coordinated better.
I could not have hoped for better cooperation, coordination, and communication. It worked very, very well.
And Watertown residents, even those who experienced close calls with bullets penetrating their homes, had mainly praise for law enforcement officials.
I think that given the conditions they were forced to do a job that they were not trained to do at all, and I don't fault them for anything that happened. I think we were just unfortunate to be so close to such a strange occurrence that I'm not sure why, but seemed to randomly have chosen this very quiet street that we live on.
As Philip Martin reported, there are still unanswered questions about the police response that night. Law enforcement promised a full accounting, but it has yet to appear. Meanwhile, in the days following the death of Tamerlan and the capture of Jahar Tsarnaev, we learned more about the brothers. John Allen runs the Y Crew gym in Brighton, where he says Tamerlan and his friend Ibrahim Todashev were regulars. It's a small, unassuming storefront off a busy street in Brighton. Inside, though, the Y Crew mixed martial arts gym is surprisingly large, sporting wrestling mats, sparring bags, and mini boxing rings. Tamerlan Tsarnaev was a regular here, chasing his dream of boxing for the U.S. Olympic team. And it was at this gym, says owner John Allen, where Tsarnaev first met Ibrahim Todashev, a fellow Chechen also interested in martial arts.
I don't think Tamerlan was too fond of Ibrahim at the beginning. Tamerlan would always say that kicking was dirty and that, wrestling and jiu-jitsu was dirty. He always had sort of a holier-than-thou sort of vibe to him, and Ibrahim was quite different. Ibrahim was much more humble, but he had a chip on his shoulder, really bad. Kind of polar opposite to Tamerlan. For lack of a better word, to me, he's crazy.
This video of one of Todashev's fights speaks to his intensity. But if Todashev was a good fighter, Tamerlan Tsarnaev was even better, twice capturing the New England Golden Gloves championship. But in 2010, a new rule barred non-citizens from advancing to the national tournament, and an arrest for domestic assault threatened to sideline his application for citizenship. Tamerlan's dreams of Olympic glory were dashed. Did you notice any changes in him?
He started to become a little bit more religious. He grew a beard, and he always had a very extreme view. And then after the Olympic debacle, he started to eventually pray in the gym. He would either in this corner over here or that corner over here. Even with Ibrahim sometimes, Ibrahim Todashev, they would pray, face whichever direction they were supposed to.
Tamerlan Tsarnaev and Ibrahim Todashev were now coming to the gym together regularly. And John Allen says Tsarnaev's increasingly extreme views were beginning to rub off on Todashev's already volatile personality. Todashev never paid to use the gym, so one day he was asked to help out instead, like sweeping mats. That, Allen says, sent Todashev into a rage.
He all of a sudden went crazy. No, this against my religion. I'd never sweep mats. This woman's work. I'm a man. I'll never, ever sweep a mat for a man. The most bizarre part about it was you have somebody who speaks almost no English and suddenly was able to say this or something to this effect. I know sweep mats, but I will fight your enemies to my last breath and see them dead. Really, that's what came out of his mouth. It was shocking, wow.
Tamerlan's brother, Jahar Tsarnaev, rarely came to the gym. But just 3 days before the marathon bombing, he showed up with Tamerlan and another unidentified man. Tamerlan introduced the unidentified man as his brother, even though he's not. Then, says Allen, things took an ugly turn.
You see them walk in, and immediately Tamerlan's told to take his sneakers off, and he begins arguing about it with the manager. When the manager had said something, immediately his brother starts taking off his shoes. The third guy, I'm not really sure who the third guy was, just kind of sat there watching the whole thing. Tamerlan argued for a while, and then after that, he was quite disrespectful.
Meanwhile, the gym manager emailed Allen, who was traveling in Thailand, asking for permission to throw them out. Did you give permission to kick them out?
Oh, absolutely.
As for that mysterious third man, Alan still has no idea who he is, but believes we haven't seen the last of him.
I'm sure he's relevant in the trial. He must be. I mean, if they're hanging out with him 48 hours before the bombing, introducing people as their brother, and he's speaking, in Russian or whatever language that they were speaking, I'm sure he's a person of interest.
3 days after getting tossed from the gym, the bombs went off near the Boston Marathon finish line. As we reported earlier, Tamerlan Tsarnaev later died in a shootout with Watertown police. His gym friend, Ibrahim Todashev, was shot and killed by law enforcement during an interrogation in Florida. Todashev was allegedly about to incriminate Tamerlan Tsarnaev in an unsolved triple murder in Waltham. Meanwhile, throughout the entire marathon saga and to this day, there are many inspiring stories of hope and of heroes, of crushing injuries and miraculous rebounds. One of them, the story of Caitlin Cates and Leo Fonseca. Like so many of the victims, Caitlin Cates and her boyfriend Leo Fonseca went to Boylston Street to watch friends cross the finish line. After the bomb went off, Fonseca picked up Cates, who suffered a serious leg injury, and carried her to their car a block away. The two joined us 5 weeks after the bombing.
The fact that there was so much medical personnel on the scene and people that weren't able to get to the hospital quickly were treated quickly, and the fact that we were able to get to a great hospital so quickly made a huge difference for a lot of people.
Now, I know you're a tennis player.
I am, as are you, so I've learned.
That's right. So you're going to be able to play again?
I should be. They did tell me I'll have 100% recovery. Sprinting might be the only trouble, which there's a lot of sprinting in tennis, but I'm determined I'll be back on the court in no time.
And do you feel like you can walk pretty well now?
Yes, I do. I got the okay to walk a little over a week and a half ago. I'd secretly already been walking. Don't tell my surgeon. But yeah, I've been walking pretty normal in the last few days. Longer periods, 6 blocks now, 7 blocks.
Leo, you were, conscious. You weren't wounded. So were you aware of what else was going on around you? Were you aware of how many other people were coming in? I mean, did you have a good sense?
Unfortunately, I had a pretty good sense of what was going on. Certainly not to the extent of it, but, in the sort of pile that we ended up in after the first bomb went off, there were a lot of pretty seriously injured people. And, when I was walking Caitlin out of there, I saw a lot of the aftermath of what had happened where we were. And then in the time that we were in the hospital, from getting there and telling them what had happened to watching patient after patient come into the emergency room, I knew there must have been a lot of very seriously injured people. But, I had no idea that, the poor people had passed away. And, I didn't know the extent of the damage, but I knew there was a lot of people that were hurt.
Now, you met the president a few days after. I mean, he was in town on Thursday. The marathon was Monday.
Yeah, I believe it was the day of the lockdown. Was it the day? Did he come in?
That was the next day.
That was the next day.
Oh, it was.
No, actually, he came in on a Wednesday.
Yeah. He came in before. Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought he came in before the before
he
they
did. He came in on a Wednesday,
which worried me a little bit.
Yeah,
but yes,
it was before they found the suspects.
Yes. It was an honor to meet him. He was so inspirational. Very, very, very kind. Shook each of our hands. Told us how inspirational we were.
And there are others that were inspirational, among them Roseann Sdola, who lost her right leg above the knee. When we first met Roseann, she had just been moved to Spalding Rehab Center and was adjusting to her new reality. Tell me what physical therapy is like.
It all is very physical, even the occupational therapy, making sure I could do the typical things that you would normally do every day, brush your teeth, shower, get around in the bathroom. This new facility here is phenomenal. They have a mock apartment that you go to, and you can see how to move stuff along the counters in the kitchen if you're on crutches, getting in and out of the shower, out of like an actual tub, get up and off the bed if you need to.
How bad's the pain?
Right now?
Yeah.
It's like a 3 to 4. They take you through doing weights and building your core muscles, and then physical therapy does that. There's some stretching that we usually start with, making sure that the muscles are limber, and then go through doing different arm exercises and balancing to make sure that I can balance on my left leg. It's a lot.
Is some of it directed At your right leg, too?
Yeah.
And what do they do for that?
Yeah. A lot of lifting, they'll put weights on it, and we'll do side lifts, make sure that this stays in shape as well.
So take me back to Marathon Day. What had you been doing earlier in the morning?
Same thing I've done for like the last 15 years. It's been one of my favorite days in Boston, and I get a little emotional about it because I don't know if it'll be my favorite day next year. But same thing I've done every year. Go to the Red Sox game with friends, and it was a beautiful sunny day. We walked over to Boylston Street and went to one of the local bars there that we've gone to again for years, and knowing that different friends were going to meet up there later, and got notification that one of our friends was close to coming down Boylston Street, so we ended up going out to watch the race and was standing along the road and just, cheering on the runners and waiting. And it was just really weird. Within a matter of a couple minutes, the first bomb went off. And it was just really strange because, again, I've done this for so long. We've never had guns or cannons or, something to salute the runners. And there was just the pop, pop. And it was literally at my feet. I thought they were more like grenades being kind of thrown in, but just because it was like I thought it was like hitting the ground or it came from the ground. And then I just remember kind of not knowing what was going on.
So the second one was what hit you?
Exactly, yeah, I was in the second one. And
Did you realize right away you were hurt?
I want to say yes and no, because I think it was just so surreal that I think my brain said you're hurt, but then I wanted to run, but I was on the ground and couldn't run. And I knew I couldn't run. I guess I must have yelled for help, but it was kind of like a dream where you think you're yelling for help, but you don't hear it come out. And I probably didn't hear it because of the explosion and the bomb, because I have hearing loss in one of my ears. So, and kind of like looking around, it was people were running, people were like zombies, it was like you were immediately in a bad movie and starring in it. And then some guy at the time that I didn't know, or some kid who I've recently met, saw me, and for whatever reason he was drawn to me, and he's like, "You have to get out of here." And he pulled me to the street, and then people started to help me. But I mean, I had seen the blood pouring out.
Did you know your leg was gone?
I didn't think I had a leg, and I kept, when he came over, he's like, "You got to get out." I'm like, I don't have a leg. I can't get up. And I guess I had a leg still. And when he was carrying me, I could feel it. I could feel things. And we got to the middle of Boylston Street, and another gentleman came over and was helping him do the tourniquet on my leg. And I just kept my eyes closed and I kept conscious. Part of me wanted to just let go, but I knew if I went unconscious that I probably wouldn't live.
6 months later, Roseann Sdola had come a long way. She was now an outpatient at Spalding Rehab and had been fitted for a series of prosthetic legs, learning to deal with new challenges, like the realization one of her legs wasn't waterproof.
I was always so paranoid about getting the other one wet, whether it was raining or, being around little kids who have hoses or water guns or whatever, and I was always paranoid that it was going to get wet and malfunction.
Now she has settled on a military leg called the X3. After the bombings, the government made the leg available to all of the amputees. Still, it's not exactly what she wants. I remember one of the things you said to me 6 months ago was, you want a real-looking leg. Eventually, will you be able to get that?
I'm in the process of getting what they call a dress-up leg. And that one will have a static 2-inch heel, and it will have the silicone cover. So if I want to wear dresses or skirts, then I'll put that leg on opposed to this one, and I'll have that one instead.
One of the other inspirational efforts to come out of the marathon bombings was the Boston One Fund. 231 victims shared $61 million in donations, and the fund continues to grow. More than $10 million has come in since the fund's administrator, Ken Feinberg, distributed the money in July. It's not clear how the final distributions will be made, but it's a good problem to have. And finally tonight, the Boston Red Sox, whether their World Series win was fueled by the events of April is not for sure, but it sure makes a good story.
This is our city.
That was an unfiltered David Ortiz in April, spewing a sentiment we all shared. This is our town, and two misguided terrorist thugs are not going to bring us down.
And now they've won the pennant!
From worst to first, following 2012's last place finish, not too many people were predicting a world-class comeback.
I had really no expectations. I mean, after the last couple of years, you thought, well, these guys seem really nice. They seem like good guys. What is that going to translate into?
It translated into a World Series win over the St. Louis Cardinals.
The Red Sox are world champions!
And they won at home for the first time since 1918.
Who ever thought this would happen? Absolutely not. It's one of the most amazing, if not the single most amazing thing I've ever seen in all the years I've covered Boston sports.
The traditional duck boat parade drew hundreds of thousands to the streets of Boston. The horrific events of Marathon Monday, though, weighing heavily on the hearts of fans and the team as they stopped at the finish line to remember those lost and hurt that day. And that is it for our look back at a year defined for Bostonians by the crippling tragedy of the Boston Marathon bombings, an event that gave birth to the slogan, Boston Strong, which is still going strong. I'm Emily Rooney. Thanks for watching.